Welcome back to the Owner Seat, the show for operators and builders who want the truth about what's coming next in fitness, wellness, and longevity, and what it means for growth, margins, and survival. Today's guest is one of the clearest thinkers in the industry in the intelligence era. Yes, intelligence era in the fitness and wellness industry. I love it. What happens when AI, compute, and connected systems don't just optimize operations, they change what's possible. Garrett Marshall has spent over 22 years building and scaling across fitness, tech, and wellness, spanning executive leadership, partnerships, product, and SaaS growth. He's currently the CEO and founder of Wellbuilt Ventures. He's also held major roles across the industry: president of Xponential Plus at Xponential Fitness, CEO of Fitness on Demand, business development at Wellbuilt, and early career leadership at Lifetime, one of my favorites. Here's what matters for this episode. Garrett isn't an AI commentator. He's built inside the real constraints of operations and growth, and he's been part of outcomes most people only talk about. 2 IPOs, multiple Inc. 1000 fastest growing awards, and repeatable SaaS ARR growth, a big goal for all of us. So today we're getting direct. Why compute is changing discovery and the second order effects for wellness and longevity. What personalization at scale actually means and what breaks when you try to ship it. Why simplicity wins and why one app for everything is a trap. How operators should build connected ecosystems, think systems of record, and API first tools in that middleware conversation. We'll chat about that. The future of agentic work, think browser native assistants, workflows in the internet itself. I'm excited about that. And finally, the real security conversation. We cannot miss this. What's legit, what's exaggerated, and what leaders should actually do. Garrett, welcome to the Owner Seat podcast, sir. Such a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Every time we talk, it's an easy, natural conversation, whether it's recorded or just when we see each other in person. So thanks again for inviting me.
Oh, it's always so good to see you in person. One of the last times we actually got on something like this was HFA, right? And it was live. So it was so cool. I didn't have a chance to go there, but to be able to live it through you and just some of the things that you were chatting about or even thinking about what was to come. I mean, just in the last, what is it, been 4 months, 5 months, like the amount of change and progress that the industry has made because of someone like you and Wellbuilt Ventures. I'm totally pumped and I'm just so excited for this year. By the way, Happy New Year.
Thank you. Happy New Year to you. Yeah, it's been, probably actually almost going on a year because that was in March last year.
That's right. It's right around the corner.
Yeah. But you're right. It feels like 3 or 4 weeks. And
yeah,
I'm so glad to be able to do this again because you and I think, joked about this afterwards. I was on the brink of being deathly sick at HFA. And then the way it worked is I kind of had to sidebar in between meetings, and I went over to an area that was as kind of quiet as possible, but not quiet. And I had my phone like propped up on somebody's empty, like soft drink can. And I was trying to talk loud. It was terrible. I'd lost my voice. So hopefully I can do a little bit of a redemption here today.
What's funny about I had no idea. Y'all, this is the behind the scenes. You just never know. For instance, I'm in a hotel room. I got a lamp leaned against my computer. This is how we get it done. The raw, the real. So funny. Well, thanks for sharing that. That's awesome. And it was such a good conversation. And I'm looking forward to spending time with you. I mean, 22 years across fitness and tech. What's the biggest pattern you've learned about scaling that most founders typically are intimidated or refuse to accept?
About scaling. I mean, what comes to mind immediately for me, it's, I guess, a little bit less about refusal, but just the fact that a lot, in my experience, and especially over the last 2 years, as I've been out as a free agent doing what, I don't like the word consulting, but we'll call it consulting because everybody understands what that means, but really offering growth as a service to other fitness and wellness businesses. A clear pattern is that most businesses lack a really clear strategic plan, a well-articulated plan, and you'd be surprised at how prevalent that is, even at the highest level, even at the enterprise level in business. Or in the other case, if the business does have a clear strategic plan, They go through an exercise, they hire Accenture for a couple $100,000, and then they park it in a folder somewhere for it to collect dust. So in other words, the leadership in the business don't have transparency, they don't have access to it, and it's not in a system or a platform that allows it to evolve with the business. And that's obviously key, because the day following your creation of this great strategic plan, things change. Things change with your
Right.
competitors. Things change in technology and product offering and market size, all sorts of stuff, right? And so, conducting that exercise, but then putting it somewhere where no one uses it. So it's more or less the same as just not having a strategic plan altogether.
Yeah, and that reminds me, some of the things I've been coaching some franchisees and franchisors on is scenario-based planning. You just never know. I mean, business changes all the time. The economy is changing. I mean, look what's going on right now. There's this like level of uncertainty. Then we have some highs, and out of nowhere, the next week there's a low. And you have to be nimble. You have to be ready. And I love building financial models that maybe it's a minus 10%, maybe it's a plus 10%. You just never know what's going to happen. So I love that you mentioned that. And you've been a part of large corporations, big brands. I mentioned them earlier, as well as SaaS startups. What do you feel like when you're looking at growth? What are the growth killers that you typically see? Is it bad product? Is it the positioning of it all, bad positioning, or is it bad systems and execution?
I guess the way that I think about that, I'll take the easy road here, but I would say that like product and execution, those are prerequisites. You're
Mhm.
not going to really be that successful, and you're certainly not going to be best in class or competitive if you don't have great product and you're not executing well as a company. And of course, there's a performance curve to that for sure, right? Like
Right.
how good you are at execution and how strong your product is. But if you take those two out of the equation, that just kind of leaves positioning. But I do think positioning, it kind of ties back to what we just were talking about with a clear strategic plan. If out of the gate, you're not completely clear on which markets you're attacking, what your competitive advantage is. And that's normally when you think about your value proposition and competitive advantage, it's not just one thing.
Mm.
It's nice to like throw in a whiteboard or like in a corporate binder or something, our value proposition is
Right.
X. But in reality, it's going to be a set of competitive factors, right? If you just
Mm.
think of any product, right? When you make when a customer or another business makes a decision to buy that, there's a number of factors that play into the decision-making process. And so you've actually got to, in that plan, you've got to clearly define which of those you'll own and how much of each of like how strong you'll be on each of those competitive factors. And then from there you go
Mhm.
down and, I would always advise thoroughly define who the consumer is, get really granular. Like if you're going to own this one thing and you make a commitment in your business that nobody's going to beat us on this thing, right? Who's the customer? What's the exact persona or profile of the customer
So
that you're
good.
trying to target with that? Call it an ICP. A lot of companies
Mhm.
like to say that now, an ideal customer profile. Normally it's multiple personas as well. But
Mhm.
like if you don't have that and it's not clear, and again, I'll just reinforce the comment that I had made earlier about the fact that each of those artifacts, if you will, because there's a lot of things that need to go into this plan, but they're moving targets because in the
Mhm.
real world, things are changing all the time. Businesses who've been in business for any amount of time know this. Your competitor does XYZ strategy. Now, the other competitors of that competitor now need to respond. How are you going to
Mhm.
respond to that? That changes your plan, right? So that's like the tip of the spear. And if you don't have that, then it becomes almost futile to try and operationalize everything else. So drawing up marketing campaigns, the messaging associated with that marketing, if you don't know what it is you're trying to clearly say to the customer, right? Like the value proposition, customer promise statement, whatever you want to call it, then your marketing campaigns are always going to be suboptimal, less than what
Right.
they could be, right? And then you think about all the other operational aspects of a business, standing up a sales team, that, it could be B2C business, a B2B, but building those teams, defining their goals, measuring their progress. It's really an imperfect science to do any of that if you weren't really clear out of the gate. And so I know that's a long-winded answer. I guess
No,
I would
so good.
probably say positioning,
Yeah.
and especially in today's world, when speed to concept, speed to market, the ability
Right.
to stand up vaporware and make it look really good, go into base 44 and say, build me a website that looks like a 10-year-old business doing XYZ. It's so easy today, right? So you
Love it. The vibe coding.
need vibe coding, exactly. And
Yeah.
so positioning becomes that much more important if you want to, I guess, cut through the noise.
You're taking me back, and I do want to talk about a Wellbuilt as well, but you're taking me back to Stratego, where I was casting a wide net. Everyone was my ICP at that time, right? In my mind, no niche, right? And I remember having a conversation very similar to what you're putting down around, what do you want to be the guy of? Like, what do you want Stratego to be? Like, who is it truly serving? Who are you talking to? Who is your ICP? And so obviously it made some pivots since then. But the other one was Valicites. And just to give you a real life case study, and this was a couple months ago, where I wanted to talk to our team at Valicites. It's a AI powered cash flow forecast. Well, now it is. We were saying SaaS platform, right? An AI powered finance platform, and it was just so broad. It was, our bandwidth is pulled apart, our messaging was broad, and we thought, cast this wide net. It's gonna be awesome. Everyone's gonna want it, and the market has a great way of telling you, no, it's not what we want. And we had to listen a ton. We had to get feedback on what is the true pain point. We found it's cash flow. It's taken forever. It's too manual. There's a ton of finance leaders out there that have no visibility. And to
Well,
your point, it was the positioning, and it was like saying no to a ton of things. And I was going to ask you about that, like whether it's Wellbuilt or maybe some of the companies that you support and advise. How do you make sure you're saying no to the things you just know is not your laser focus, is not what you're trying to do and serve?
yeah. And I hate to be redundant. Well, one thing though, I'll say real quick on the example that you just gave, that's exactly right. And you have to keep in mind too, that it's actually, if you have a diluted sort of brand promise or brand identity, it's also hard on the buyer. Like I've been in
Mm,
that position too. Take Xponential as an example,
yeah.
enterprise level business. And, every leader in that company is going to have a sizable budget and lots of things that they need to buy.
Mhm.
And for anyone who's in that position that has a budget, an expense budget to manage, they want to be as efficient with that budget as possible. Right? And
Right.
when you're getting pitched, especially in categories that are really crowded, you're trying to get to what's the differentiation with this vendor, let's call it. You want to get
Mhm.
there like in the first 10 seconds. I've even been in meetings where the meetings open by saying, tell me how you're different than everybody else that I've talked to in this
Love that.
category. Right. And
Wow.
it cuts both ways. You were asking, I'm sorry, about prioritization.
Yeah, and just saying no to certain things, and whether that's, you've had to do that personally as you're growing Well-Built Ventures, or a brand that you're advising or supporting. I mean, it's hard to do that, right? Because you want to say yes to everything, thinking that it's going to help you grow and acquire clients or what have you, or sell your product, but it's actually a wrong move, it sounds like.
Yeah, I've said a lot, and I've said this on other podcasts too. I think it's more important to figure out what you're not going to do than what it is you're going to do,
Mm, mhm.
because great ideas are a dime a dozen. It's the execution, the resource input, the process that you stand up around that. Those are all the kind of boring, shitty stuff that nobody talks about, but that's actually
Yeah,
where all the hard work is. Like,
right.
you sit around a boardroom table with a bunch of smart people in any company, they're all going to have lots of great ideas. Yeah, there's no
Mhm.
shortage of that, but it's the execution that becomes the hard part. Unfortunately, there's not I don't have a magic bullet answer for that, but let me frame that, I guess, just a little bit different, because
Mhm.
if you're in a big organization and you have a team, that question is accentuated that much more. It's not just about like, what do I say no to? Because I can control that. But how
Right.
do I keep my team focused on, number one, just working on the things that are really needle movers in the business? And then two, if they can do that, how do you get them to work together in unison? Right.
Right.
And the kind of boring, long, not that exciting answer is there are management processes. What I would do with what I like to do with my teams, and I've done this probably over the last 10 plus years, I will set aside 1 week, typically in October, where I bring together all senior leaders. And we spend typically about 3.5 days. So it's very intense and it's all day. Now, if you go back to Fitness on Demand, which is pure software company, that's a good example here. We had an office in Australia. We had an office in London. So I'm bringing those people over too. So you've got the geographical component. Right. In addition to that, we serve a number of different verticals, from fitness to government, education, university, multifamily housing, multi-tenant corporate real estate, like all sorts of stuff, right? And each of those verticals has leadership, salespeople, marketing campaigns, and everything within them, right? So what I will do is I'll spend typically 2 or 3 weeks. So the board will hand off to me the top line numbers, right? Top line and bottom line. And so that's not, I can argue with that, but ultimately that's not my discretion. Right. So I've got that to work with. Then I will build that out a little bit more. So what I will do as a next step is I'll take the revenue number and let's say EBITDA number, and whatever your business is, I will break that down into units. So I will look across those verticals and those sales teams. I will look across the geographies because I know them. And then I will translate one top line revenue number into goals and budgets for each of those. Let's just say teams. That's the easiest way to think of it. Each of those teams, right? 2 or 3 weeks in advance of this 1 week where we're all in person together, we will do a series of 2 or 3 meetings where their job is to take the hard, quantifiable targets and then break those down into what we call quarterly objectives. So the quarterly objectives are not just numbers, right? But they're actually the top 2 or 3 tactics or objectives that we'll focus on as a business to achieve that goal, okay? For the quarter, right? And so I like to have my leadership come to an agreement on what those things are before we sit down in person, right? And so what that forces the leaders in the business to do is to take ownership and come to an agreement. They don't need me involved in that process. Their job is to work together and come to an agreement on what the most important objectives for the business will be for the year. Okay. So that's all figured out. So it's going to be things like, I'm just silly examples, like we're going to run a back to school campaign, right? Whatever. That's not a good example, but it's one people can understand, right? Okay. And so if that's, God forbid, that's an actual needle mover for your business, but if it were, right, there'd be a marketing, it touches all functions within the business. There's going to be a marketing budget associated with it. Marketing budget needs to have whatever metrics are important to your business, a cost per lead, a CPM, a conversion rate, qualified B2B leads that get handed over to the sales team, and so on and so forth, right? So my leaders work all of that out together before we come together in person. And that creates partnership, right? So if you're the head of marketing and you're saying, yeah, exactly. Buy-in and ownership. It's like if we both have now come to the table and agreed that the back to school campaign is going to be one of the top 12 initiatives for the year. Okay. Then we've already negotiated with each other. You've told me how much money you need to spend, and you've told me how many leads it's going to generate for my B2B sales team. Now I've got to do the work of actually helping my senior salespeople, meaning the sales manager in this example, build those out into individual goals. How are you going to get there and create that same buy-in at the individual contributor level? So in our process, they do all that over 2 or 3 weeks. Then we come together for 3.5 days. And the purpose of that time together, not just to create sort of unity among the team and so forth, we'll take those 12 to 15 objectives that have been prioritized by the senior management, and then we will figure out which quarters we slot them into. And so that is a negotiating. I mean, back to school is bad because it's time bound, but for other things, we will typically I will typically drive towards having only 2 or 3 big rocks every quarter, nothing else, right? And by the way, going through this exercise forces everybody to give and take. And so you're cutting a lot of stuff You're trimming a lot of stuff off the list throughout this entire process. And it's
Just
simple.
crossing it out.
Exactly. It's not simple, but there's one calculus. Does said initiative help us get to these numbers more so than the top 11 on the list? If not, drop it off, right? So think of it like a card sorting exercise. The team's there together for 3.5 days, and then they will plot, eventually through conversation, they'll plot the 2 or 3 key objectives in every quarter, right? And those already have quantifiable targets associated with them. Doing this is an investment both in time and in resources to bring everybody together. You calculate the salaries up of the 10, 12 people that are in the room. It's not cheap, but here's where investing $1 saves you $3 down the line. I don't have to micromanage the team, right? Because if it's self-evident, if we're spending money on stuff or taking on technical initiatives that don't serve the 2 or 3 key objectives for the month, why are we doing that? Right. And sometimes that does happen. Sometimes there are anomalies that your plan needs to be pliable, and it may need to expand and contract at times. But I try to get all that done to the best of our ability at the beginning of the year. And I don't have to micromanage. I let my leadership work in where I can manage. Is if they're veering towards that or outside of that, I can step in to help. Right. But for the most part, we're all unified on what the most important things to do for that year are. And we've already gone through the painful process of having to say no to a lot of things before we even launch the year.
So hyper alignment, speaking of, that team camaraderie and as everyone's throwing out different ideas and you're crossing things out, you're circling things, hyper alignment on what we're going to do and what we're not going to do. And I think that is key, right? Being able to say no to the things that we know won't give the biggest lift to what those main objectives are, the main result is. It's so good. And you've had a lot of experience, whether that be with large corporations or startups, but you've also been through the IPO process on multiple occasions, twice, right? And when you think back about those experiences, what do you feel like were some of the trends that you saw that investors really rewarded? Like, what were some of the things that just got brought up a ton as the most important things as you're going through some of these IPO transactions and journeys?
Well, the first IPO with Lifetime, I was not hands-on. I was much more involved with the recent IPO in 2021 at Xponential, and my joining that company was part of building. I came there specifically for the purpose of helping to support the narrative prior to taking the company public. Investors, and also I'd say public markets, they don't like to be surprised. I mean, that's the one really interesting thing that hits you right in the face. And obviously, not only investors, but also the public markets, like they favor real financial results. That's a statement of the obvious. But what I learned that was interesting in the 5 years that I've just finished with Xponential is it's really bad if you miss your forecast, but it can also be really bad if you far exceed your forecast, because that's a signal that you don't really understand your business very well. And so, one thing that a lot of businesses, I keep pulling everything back to a clear strategic plan, but one thing that I think a lot of businesses don't really think about, which any institutional investor is going to grill you on, is your engine of growth, which is a fancy way of saying, and there are several tried and true engines of growth that exist out there, but they want a very simple answer on how does your business grow? Like, what are the inputs and then what are the outputs? In other words, expected return. So what an investor is looking for is a high degree of predictability and confidence that they understand the trajectory of your business.
Yeah, that's such a good one. And having gone through the experience, a couple different experiences recently around Q of E and capital raise, especially for those franchisors listening, right? What's signed, what's not opening, what's waiting, and just being very detailed with that pipeline, to Garrett's point, of your growth engine, and not BSing, because there'll be people like Garrett or myself or some others that are going to go in and do due diligence. And if there's any surprises, you lose trust. Time gets prolonged, that kills a deal, right? Or you're going to take a major haircut because now if you're not clear about that, I'm looking for other stuff and I'm going to find things to discount that sales price. And so, to
I'll
your
tell
point, Garrett, it's so important that you have those ducks in a row, no surprises.
Yeah, I'll tell you a funny, a humbling, but kind of funny story that'll be funny to you and hopefully the audience. When I was younger, this is probably upwards of 12 years ago, and the company that I was the CEO of, Fitness on Demand, it became a wholly owned subsidiary of a parent company called Lyft Brands,
Mm.
which is still around today.
Yeah.
They probably have north of 2,000 locations across the brands that they own around the world. And about this time, we had institutional private equity come in and buy the control of the business. And so the impact on me basically was, now, instead of working with the founder and the previous CEO who had funded that company and I worked with very closely, I was now coming in and reporting to the board, right? And
Mm.
so I'll never forget. And the board is, one or two, our CFO, the previous CEO, and then six of them, right? So it's majority that I won't name the PE, but it's a majority of them at majority private equity. And so
Right.
the first time I come in, have not presented this way. I've read stuff and done this or that, but I'd never done a full presentation in front of the board. So I step in, okay, you're up, go, right? And I was nervous, and I probably wasn't 3 or 4 minutes into the 30, 40 slide deck, right? And the managing director just stopped me and he goes, "We don't really care about how good everything is going to be. What are the risks?" And that's a
Mm.
true story. He
Yeah.
literally cut me off. He goes, "Everything looks good." They had already looked at the financial forecast, right? They knew that before they got there. They're thumbing through it on the table. And then he just says, "We're here to help you." He goes, "We don't really care about all the good stuffs. What should we be, good stuff rather? What should we be concerned with? Where are the
Mm.
risk factors?"
Yeah. Protect
So
my money.
sometimes, to your point, yeah, I mean, but also, like you made the comment for franchisees, like there is credibility in that honesty.
Right.
And if you're looking to exit your business or raise money, vulnerability and honesty sometimes can actually help.
Yeah, good point. You've been a pioneer in this complete evolution and maybe revolution of all things wellness. And one of the things that you talk a lot about is this significant improvement in shoot. Even right now, it's improved, right? I mean, exponentially compute power. And what you mentioned is unlimited compute is unlocking a wave of discovery. Can you unwrap that for us? And sometimes this topic of compute, and we'll get into a lot of tech and AI, sometimes we can lose some people. And I just want people to hang in there because there's a lot of good nuggets here. I've been following you, Garrett, and I'm like, you are on it and you're leading the way for our industry, both fitness and wellness. Can you walk us through just compute power and what are you seeing there?
Yeah. So the basic idea, when I've talked about this before, and when I say unbridled or unlimited compute, I'm using that a little bit tongue in cheek because I'm sure people in the comments are going to refer to mainstream AI models, right? And there are some real constraints on compute,
Mm.
but that's not what I'm talking about. Basically, the paradigm that I think is relevant to people in our industry is that intelligence is being eliminated as a differentiator. So
Mm.
if you think about it and you fast forward 3 years and you go, what if my knowledge about whatever, an industry, a product, a business, that no longer is a competitive advantage
Mhm.
because intelligence is ubiquitous. It's available to everybody and it's free, right?
Right.
It's a very different world. We're going to see the result of that. We're going to see all sorts of new products. We're going to see all sorts of new businesses, particularly in either businesses or product categories where the value that they provide is predicated on data and math,
Mm.
because the models, even LLMs, are very effective when it comes to formulaic evaluations, right? So a simple example, I try not to be vague, but like the process of drug discovery, right?
Mm.
Which used to require human beings to come up with a formula and then actually test the thing.
Mm.
That can now be done in hyperscale, and it can be done digitally without any human intervention, right? So
Right.
if you're thinking about like, if you're thinking about molecule structure for a drug, it's not like you go through the process from 0 to 1, you concept it, you do a prototype, you put it into a trial, and it either does or doesn't work, right? This is a computer running a synthetic trial based on the data and the data that it's been trained on, right? And on its own, making a minor adjustment to a single aspect of that molecule and trying that. And then after that doesn't work, going on and on and on down the chain. Possibility for discoveries of all sorts of new things is on this rapid trajectory that we've never seen before. But
Right.
like to again, like you said, not to lose people, like to bring it back to what does that mean for all of us, like in practical terms? I
Right.
think it means that we're going to see a lot of disruption of current products. And particularly in health and wellness, this is the good news, because I don't always want to sound draconian, is I also think that we're going to see a big increase in consumer demand and their expectations, because
Right.
as in fitness and wellness, as we get more personalized, then we drive better results. Consumers recognize that it's more efficient than ever before, and there are more tools, products, and services to be healthy than ever before. That spreads awareness, and it also, that awareness creates more demand.
Right.
Have you ever heard of like Jevons paradox? Are you familiar with that?
Yeah. Yeah. Can you share
Yeah.
that? Can
So
you, yeah, share that with it. That's great. Love this.
I think this was coined. I think this wasn't about having to do with coal production. Don't quote me on that, but I
Mm.
think it was coal production. But the basic idea is that for any commodity, as the cost decreases, the demand increases. And so we're going to see that all in many, many different industries, just because technologies are driving costs down. It's wellness and fitness, being that those are um, uh, endeavors really kind of predicated on data and math, with which AI is particularly strong with. I think we're going to see that accentuated even more.
Amazing. And what are your thoughts on peptides, GLPs? Actually, when we were chatting, as you were at HFA, this is actually a big topic, and it seems to have gotten even more. Speaking of demand, the demand and the cost is now starting to significantly decrease for GLPs and peptides and biologic, all of it. Do you think there's this is a long-term shift? Do you really, is this not going away for some time? What are your thoughts on all of this? What are you seeing out there?
I actually don't think it's a shift at all. I know a lot of people think of it that way. Uh, are you familiar with jobs to be done theory, that idea of
No.
customer jobs? So I'm no expert, but the basic idea is that the job that customers don't buy products, they rent solutions that help them accomplish a job. And this work and framework has been around for a while, but the argument that they make in the jobs to be done is that customer jobs actually never change, but how customers accomplish that job does. So like, there's an expression that maybe you've heard or some of the audience has heard before, which is like, a customer doesn't want to buy a 1/4 inch drill bit. They want to buy a 1/4 inch hole.
I
And
get what you're saying.
it's this sort of
The
paradigm
mean the
exists
means to
everywhere.
the end is, in a sense.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
like, if you want to get from point A to point B, you can take a plane, you can take a car, you can ride a bicycle, but the customer job is still to move from point A to point B. Right. And in our case, and also, what that theory bears witness to is that markets always evolve to get the customer's job done as efficiently as possible. Right. And so GLPs, peptides, vitamins, you can throw in that category. They're just not as sexy or as new of a topic. They're all still saying they're serving the same customer job, right? People who are using those products and services have a variety of different jobs they're trying to solve. It could be to lose weight. It could be that they have a metabolic condition. It could be that they want to be more mobile and flexible so they can play with their grandkids. If they're going to climb Everest, they need to improve their VO2 like fill in the blank, right? But the point is that peptides and biologics are just one new tool that solve the same customer job that has always been the same customer job. Take losing weight. That's a simple example, right? This is a new solution. We've always talked about in the industry, the magic pill. If we had a pill that everybody could take and instantly get fit, they would do it, right?
Right.
And I don't think that's coming for a long time. But in terms of like peptides and biologics, we really are just at the tip of the iceberg on, and this ties back to technology and drug discovery and everything we've kind of been talking about. I posted a week or 2 weeks ago on LinkedIn a list that I found from Brian O'Rourke that he had in a presentation of all this sort of ancillary.
Yeah.
Did you see that? Drugs and compounds, peptides that are actually in either, in late clinical trials. So it's fascinating. I mean, they have things that, that change the way that your gut experiences a certain flavor. I guess that's a bad example. The way you taste certain flavors, there's all sorts of discoveries for how, macronutrients are metabolized, all sorts of stuff. So I'm convinced that we all as consumers are innately going to always pursue the things that help us be the healthiest people as efficiently as possible.
I love that. And so when you think about, for instance, many in the audience are business owners, and they may run a studio or a gym with many cases limited square footage, right? We're not going to, whether it's capital intensive or just square footage limitations, probably not running a clinic out of your studio or gym. And Garrett, what have you seen? Like, what is the best way that gym owners, studio owners, franchisors, as they think about it and strategize, like, how do they get involved with positioning themselves around this wellness change, this peptides, biologics? And we'll get into AI here in a little bit, but what are you seeing? Speaking of efficient ways to do it, what's the best way as you think about the next 2 to 5 years? Like, how can they take action today?
That's tough because my inclination is to be very thorough, but that's another one where there's not a magic bullet answer and every situation is going to be a little bit different. But for the class of businesses that you described, so retail operator, it's probably a hub and spoke model, right? What I know doesn't work is trying to own the whole thing. A jack of all trades, master of none sort of thing. Right. The best way, do some of this positioning, which is why it's such a great question that you started with, that we're talking about are things that I do on a regular basis through the consulting side of my business.
Right.
And the tool that I like to use, because it's, when you do this, it becomes evergreen, is called a value network. And if it's okay, I'll just explain that really quickly.
Yes, please do.
A value network, and I'm going to try to be really clear, but it's going to be hard to kind of illustrate this. But the idea of a value network is, think of it as a hierarchy of all the products and services inside a system of use. Here's an example. A computer, forget the monitor for a second, but let's just say computer. A computer is a system of use, right? Inside that computer, though, you have a motherboard, you have a hard drive, you have a graphics card, on and on and on. And then when you go inside of the motherboard, you've got a capacitor, you've got resistors, you've got silicone, and you could do this all the way down. But motherboard manufacturers and computer manufacturers, they have to make these same kind of decisions, right? They have to go, okay, are we just going to make the silicone motherboard and we're going to source resistors and capacitors to put the whole thing together, right? Or do we want to do the whole computer? We're going to do motherboards and we're going to do hard drives and all of it, right? They have to make these same decisions. But when you draw these trees out, that you can imagine that just for something like a computer, it gets really extensive, right? And you could do the same thing for fitness. If you were to say like, okay, an on-demand streaming fitness service, right? You could say, okay, that's a system of use. What are the components within it? Well, you have a mobile app, you have a video player, right? Inside of the mobile app, you have content video, you have talent instructors, you have music, you have choreography, you have, all the features in the app. You could just keep going and going and going. As you break those pieces out, this is the takeaway light bulb part. As you break those pieces out, each one of the little nodes in the tree. So let's say we'll go back to the computer. because I think it's just everybody understands the computer.
Right.
If you're a motherboard manufacturer trying to figure out, are we going to build everything, or are we just going to do motherboard and we're going to outsource capacitors? Every one of the little nodes has its own set of competitive factors, which define how performance is evaluated in each of those, within each of those product categories.
Wow.
So for like a capacitor, it's going to be speed, cost, durability, ability to integrate with other motherboards, right? I'm just kind of making these up because I'm getting out over my skis, but you get the point. Is like you
Yeah.
draw these out, each of those nodes on the tree, there are a separate set of competitive factors for which people or businesses choose to buy or not buy those goods. Okay.
Yeah.
So this to me is a great way to answer the question that you asked. If you're a single studio, I would go look this up online. Everybody knows there's a YouTube video for everything today, right? Go look up Value Network,
I love that.
Innovators
Value
Dilemma.
Network.
Yeah. And you can link that in the show notes, but you draw this out, right? And you're going to go, okay, what system of use do we fit in? It's probably like exercise or a workout, right? And you start breaking those pieces out, but then you go up as well. And this is what a lot of retail, and myself included, I've spent a lot of years in some of the biggest gym operators out there, forget to go up, right? They think from their position in the value network down. It's really easy to get caught in that. And that's why you see marketing out there like, hey, we're 24 hours. We have tanning. It's like all stuff that only is talked about among us and the rest of our competitors. But you forget when you go up that there's all these other parts of a consumer's wellness journey, right? But if you actually plot this out and you put down the competitive factors for each of the elements of a consumer's health, let's say, it will become fairly obvious which of those you have the business foundation and resources to win on and which ones you don't. And building an app that competes with Apple Fitness, not going to be an option for most of us who are retail operators, right? Developing a proprietary integration so that we can sync a user's fitness data with our member management system. Probably going to be out of the question, right? But if you do this exercise, it can become really telling and also give you a competitive position because your competitors may not be thinking like this. And the short answer, I know it's not short anymore, but for a retail operator, is probably a hub and spoke, right? You figure out what job you're going to deliver on for a customer, and then where you're going to integrate and why. And why is it important to actually map it out? I know that sounds boring as hell, and it is. Why is it important to map it out and be clear on that? Because guess what? There's a million other integrations you can do. You'll never integrate with everybody. So you got to be selective about what experience and value you're going to deliver to your customer. Because there's an endless array of things that you could do. This kind of goes to your question, right? Like, how do you decide what not to do? That's important.
I was just going to say it. It reminds me of the activity you're doing with your team. You're drawing it out so you know what to cross off and say no to. Some good examples of this. And again, to your point, once you draw it out and you see ecosystems like Lifetime, or you see ecosystems, very different way of doing it, but Xponential fitness. And I'm excited to see, I'm entertained by the sequel thing as well. It's just, it's fun because we're all in the industry and you get to see it all and you kind of know the history and all of that. Really, really impressive to see those ecosystems built, but not everyone. It's very capital intensive. What I'm really excited about, Garrett, is how does this change for the small business owner when it's in a digital environment? And I think since OpenAI, 3 years ago, kind of made VR fly under the radar for a bit, I'm excited about that space. I could just only imagine what that will be like for not just enterprise grade, but for the small business owner that wants to be able to create and build in a digital environment for their consumer. I don't know. I'm excited about that because I think there are some opportunities there that maybe just weren't available to the quote unquote the common people, the independent gym owners. So I'm excited. I'm really excited about that. And speaking of that world, or even AI and tech stacks, I know you play a lot in this space as well, but how are you seeing the evolution of AI? And I know AI comes in its different forms, right? You have your generative, you have your agentic workflows, you have your agents, which some of it can be hype, right? And we're all trying to, everyone's working at it and a little bit of cart before the horse, but you're really trying to paint the picture of what's to come. And then some of it is here today, right? Whether like agents and voice and and being able to be autonomous, that is here today. Now, is it the best? That's okay. It's getting there though, which is very exciting. But does it democratize, again, going back to the independent gym owner, small business owner, and being able to compete with some of these large enterprises like the ones I use as an example there? I find it very fascinating.
Yeah, no doubt. I think you used the word democratization. I think
Mhm.
that's right. I think that, you know, c- consumers eat off many plates for their
Mhm.
wellness. And I think that works to everybody's advantage, including the individual retail operator. And so I think that's good for everybody. And as I pointed out before, as the barrier in terms of cost and the ability for all of us to have access to really incredible technology, I mean, that's here today. Like it's remarkable what's available to everyone. Doesn't matter if you're in a third world country
Right.
or, if you're here in the US or whatever. So I see that technology being used to further personalize. I see the personalization driving better results. And I see that getting many more people be healthy. So I think it's like that expression, a rising tide raises all boats, right? So I think
Right.
that's
Right.
true, regardless if you're an enterprise class business or a single independent owner operator.
Yeah. And actually going back now that you made me think about it, do you see more partnerships happening within our, and you're in you being at Xponential at that time, you're familiar with kind of complementary brands, right? Being able to support it, whether that was Club Pilates and Pure Bar or whatever, right? Some different brands where people can travel to, within, it's still within the umbrella of Expo, right? But do you think that's going to happen now that people are really trying to solve for this integrative ecosystem? Like we know it's not just movement, it's sleep, it's nutrition and supplementation, it's longevity, maybe, that vertical or what have you. Do you see a lot of brands coming together? Like I go to these conferences and I hear about it. We need to collaborate more. We need to work together, but I'm still waiting. And I love what you say. It's not going to be one app. It's going to be this integration piece, but is that going to also happen in the physical, right? The brick and mortar retail?
Yeah, that you set off a bunch of light bulbs for me. Another one of I think the big misnomers that's been talked about forever is the integration of conventional healthcare and wellness, which is preventative healthcare essentially. But that's not a new idea. And most people don't get that the incentives for how conventional healthcare make money and how the incentives or aspirations of fitness and wellness are different, completely
Mhm.
misaligned, right? So,
Right.
but that's a good example where technology is not the constraining factor, right? But I do think there'll be more integration, and I think consumers will probably force that. Um,
Mm.
and actually, I think that to a certain degree, that actually could happen with what we would consider to be, mainstream fitness and wellness and conventional healthcare. And the reason I say that is that consumers are, we talked about this, like technology drives better personalization. Personalization obviously leads to better results. More
Mhm.
people healthier are happier people. It's raising awareness for healthy lifestyle and it's making it more efficient to get healthy.
Yeah.
Um, so when that happens and there's enough demand among consumers, in other words, when there's real money involved in that, it's going to force conventional healthcare to at least consider, the more preventative approach to their business model. Let me give you an example. So like you're
Yeah.
probably familiar with like Function Health. I don't know if you know, which is a lab test company.
Mhm.
Essentially, there are products like Viome, which I've used,
Oh,
which is
I love them.
the GI product, right? And the
Yeah.
list goes on and on. And this is funny too with fitness operators because, when you ask of the owner of a fitness business or the leader of a fitness business, if it's a multi-site operator, one of the best ways to kind of convey this point is to ask them, what do you do? Right.
Mhm.
And when they start thinking about it, they go, I'm on hormone replacement therapy. I buy whey protein and casein protein from Amazon every month. My wife sees a personal trainer twice a week. It's a big, the spend is significant, right? So
Significant.
this growing awareness, people say health is the new wealth, right?
Mm.
This growing awareness has already happened. And when there's enough demand with consumers who are spending on preventative, then I think conventional healthcare would be forced to pay attention, basically. But, the other way I try to, I guess, rationalize or understand where all of this goes in terms of integration is just to look to other product categories that are much more universal and mainstream.
Mm.
Like, I've used these examples a lot, but whether it's entertainment, streaming entertainment content, whether it's navigation, wayfaring, when it comes to using apps to get directions. I could open my phone right now, but the point is most of us, when we open it, we're going to find a bunch of different tools we use for the same thing. And they
Yeah.
tend to be context specific, right? That's the distinction. And in order for those tools to continue to thrive, they have to start integrating. They have to start playing nicely with each other,
Right.
or they're not serving the customer. And there are too many options where the customer will just go the other way. So
Man.
I think we're going to see that in fitness as well.
So I want to take this to the next level, and I've brought it up on a couple shows. And when you emailed me the other day, by the way, I really appreciate the New Year's email. Thank you for that. And then you texted me today, and I'm like, man, you're just a great human, man. I really appreciate that. Thank you for taking the time. I know you got a lot of things going on, so I appreciate that. And I've just been waiting for this conversation because I mean, everything you're going through, I'm just thinking the future. And honestly, I've been up at night just thinking a lot about this integration piece, but you mentioned forced. And I think with the technology, you talk a lot about compute and hyper personalization, meaning the consumer is going to have so much real time data that they can make real time decision. And I think our industry, specifically in the fitness side, I think our industry has been so used to this monthly membership, 30 days, regardless if anyone uses it or not. But to your point, whether it's the apps or like, let's say an on-demand Uber or Lyft, I think the consumer will change to a usage. We're seeing this in AI, right? Usage-based system. I only pay when I use because the compute's so fast, we can do it that quickly. I think the consumer behavior, because we think of the day pass, well, everyone jacks up that price because who wants someone to come in for the day? We want them to buy a membership. So you jack up the price and some of us will say, hey, we'll credit that towards your membership when you get it. We're dictating the rules in that case. And there's all this tension about ClassPass too, which I think is so funny in the timing, but that's way outside. It's for complete different reasons. I think this consumer usage base where they can go to one place to another place because the data's telling them you need recovery today, you need, I don't know, high intensity interval training, and the operator, no one's going to pay, not, there's some that do this, but in many cases, no one's going to pay a full membership for all of these things. I see a world where we're forced to integrate because the consumer expects it and will only pay when they visit that site. And what's cool about it, more so for the consumer, well, good for everybody, is everyone will be challenged even more so to create an experience that is ultra differentiated and will be forced to work even harder for repeat visit. But that's what I'm thinking. I don't know. Where am I off? What do you think?
My thinking, and it's really hard for me because sometimes I get asked the question, like, what does the world look like in 5 years? And I'm like,
Yeah,
I literally can't. I can't because everything's happening so quickly, right?
it's happening so
So
fast.
I don't think to be, fully, 100% convicted or researched in my, in my thoughts. So I'm always working on those thoughts, but
Yeah,
I tend to agree with some of those things, most of that. You see, one of the things that I think is a huge risk to the conventional fitness industry right now is that their business. Let me think about the way to say this. Okay, let me make one other. Let me state one other tenet
sure.
first. Earlier, we were talking about that one of the ramifications of AI is that intelligence is eliminated as a competitive factor.
Mm.
So we're talking about a world very soon where knowledge and intelligence is either valueless or not as valuable as it was before, right?
Mm.
And you had mentioned this to me before. I forget where we were at. Oh, I think it was in Dallas. I was asked a question in the audience about, what should everyday fitness businesses, fitness operators be on the lookout for in 3 years? And I had said something along the lines like, imagine the world's most renowned wellness expert, somebody like a Gary Brecka as an example. And I said, okay, now think of his expertise, right? His ability to prescribe fitness, ability to understand the metabolism, his knowledge of sleep and recovery, supplementation, all the stuff, right? Now multiply that by 10, and whatever that number is in terms of that level of intelligence, multiply that times 100. And then whatever that number is, multiply that one by 1,000,000. Okay. Now that superhuman Gary Brecka thing is going to be
Quantum Brecka.
Quantum Brecka is
Yeah.
going to be available to everyone in the world, and it's going to be free. This is just an example in the context of fitness. So it's a big question. So if that is the case, then what is the key enabler and what are the key points of differentiation? I think it's customer experience, UX, user experience, customer experience, meaning that one of the big limitations today that we have with driving engagement is not a technical constraint or a limitation of data. It's actually the opposite. There's too much data, and data and information is fragmented. It's all over the place. It's siloed.
Unstructured.
And the average human being, number one, doesn't know how to make sense of that, right? Like, let's say that I'm trying to think of a good example. They use one product that manages their sleep, and maybe that they get the data on their iPhone. They have a wearable device that if they remember, they wear it when they work out, but it's not great at tracking strength. They go order ready to eat meals from Factor. I'm just kind of spitballing this, right?
Yeah.
None of those silos speak to each other, right? And even if they did, your average consumer, number one, isn't an expert at making sense of that information. But even if they do, they don't have the time or energy, because I'm kind of a geek with this stuff. I tried many times in my life something, and I'll get really excited about it, and then about 8 days later, I fall off, because even something as simple as logging your food, it's so unbelievably tedious.
My goodness, I hate it.
We don't need more data. Really what is going to change and increase customer engagement is simplicity. So it's doing these types of integration, like getting to a world where the majority of tools out there play nicely, but then creating a user experience that presents simplistically, but is really sophisticated, scientifically speaking, under the hood. And I think that is it's a big step for the fitness industry to get to that place, but it's also the biggest opportunity, right? Because who are the people today that have the trust and have the capability, the skill set to do that? It's fitness professionals, right? It's fitness professionals that are employed by gyms. Some of them work independent and so forth. And so, when we get to a place where let's say your goal is to lose weight, which there's a lot of aspects of that, right? Say in the training world, it's like, I'm with you for an hour a week or whatever it is, or an hour a day, but I can't control what you do the other 23 hours of the day, right?
Yes.
But when there is a tool that is actually helping me lose 5 pounds a week, and I don't feel like I have to think about it, that is what's going to really change behavior and increase adoption at the aggregate level. But it's like they always say, simple is expensive. Something that doing that sounds easy in concept, but really, really difficult to pull off.
Now you make me think about agents and having an agent or assistant at all time. I mean, where do you see agents playing a role in fitness and wellness? Is it just sales, customer service? You speak of fitness professionals. Is it somehow embedded in that whole experience? Where else? Where are you seeing at least maybe even some recent case studies or just in areas that you've seen, you know what, for now, this is where you'll probably get the best low hanging fruit, best success. Is there anywhere you're excited about the embedding of agents actually doing some big work in our industry?
Yeah, I mean, I'll put it this way. If you look at the operations model for the majority of businesses, implementing technology and AI is definitely going to maintain the current level of customer experience or improve it while
Mhm.
simultaneously improving the bottom line. No question about it,
For sure.
right? And most business owners are going to know right away where the low hanging fruit is, right? It's
Mhm.
like you pointed out, customer experience, customer support, customer success, ongoing engagement. So there
Mhm.
are a few things on the lead generation, lead conversion, more towards the top of the funnel. Right? And so that's there. Honestly, my view is agents are that's just the beginning. And it's kind of annoying because it's like, I don't want to have 40 agents on my phone that all have these quirky, weird names. It's like what I envision is, and I know, forgive me if I've said this to you before, but it's just such a clear example. If you're trying to lose weight, we'll stick with that example. What you eat is probably 85% of the equation. Right? And for most of us who lead busy lives, it's very difficult in the heat of the moment, even if you have the discipline to adhere to the right nutrition, because your options are limited. Like, if you're losing weight and nutrition is simply a formula, right? It's calories in, calories
Calories,
out.
yeah.
And if you do that math and you do it right, you will lose weight. There's no question about it. But if you're, let's say, traveling like we
Mm.
were when I saw you last in Dallas,
Yeah.
and you've got 23 minutes between either meetings or whatever it is, and within a 5-minute walk, you've got a gift shop and then like a sit down restaurant, white cloth sort of situation, right? Like that, you're going to just grab, you have to eat, so you're going to grab whatever's closest, right? But if you think about technology today, there's most every food ingredient, as well as most of the menu items for mainstream and popular restaurants are all codified, right? Like go into Nutritionix or MyFitnessPal or any of the others, and you can look at a chicken burrito with guacamole and rice, and they know for Chipotle, right? And so imagine a situation. This is where I'm talking about improving the user experience. If I know you have a goal of losing 10 pounds, right? And I have all your biometric data because you wear a wearable. I don't want you to have to input anything. I just know it because you got this device on your wrist, right? I know what your average calorie burn is on a weekly basis because I can look over history, right?
Mm.
And so I know exactly what your macronutrient needs to be for the day, but also I know that Albert typically eats between 12 and 2 o'clock. I know that from DoorDash orders, calendar appointments he's out, or from lunch appointments he's had on his calendar.
Don't look
Right.
at it. Don't look at it at all. It's
Exactly.
bad.
Exactly.
It's bad.
Same, same. But, I can also geolocate you. And I know that, wow, you're not at home and you're not at your office. So I can probably infer that you're traveling, right?
Right.
Now imagine in that 23-minute period of time, if you received a push notification that said, eat before it's too late, you tap it. And underneath it, it says 3-minute walk to this restaurant, order the salmon and spinach, like the exact meal, right? Or it says no time, tap this for DoorDash XYZ, and it'll be delivered to your room,
That is
right? So
awesome.
now for Albert, but you don't have to think at all, right? It's proactively reach out to you, and all you have to do is make one choice. Is it option A or is it option B? And you tap. That's it, right? Now imagine how much easier it would be for people to adhere to the right nutrition plan. And you can take that example and really extend it. You can start talking about, oh, it's learning your behavior. It knows what you like to eat. It's going to suggest things that have a higher likelihood that you'll actually buy them and eat them, right? All that's in there. All that stuff is part of it. But in this simple example, that's just one way where user experience is simplified to change behavior. And that, to me, it's just my humble opinion, that is the real catalyst. I don't think the
Mm.
average person wants to see more data on their wearable. I don't think they need more dashboards, more charts. I don't think they need, more drill sergeant coaches. I think you got to make it simple for them. Most people don't want to think about it, right?
You just
Like, I
want
think
to
that's a
make the decision for me in a sense.
I think that's a Steve Jobs quote. I may be getting that wrong, but it's like, that's a design principle. Don't make your user think. And so that's very different though than a chatbot, right? I don't want to
Right.
have 50 chatbots where I feel like they're like these weird digital
That's
personalities.
where I'm hating the customer experience, like customer service side of it. I'm like, there's just too
Yeah,
many. There's just too. I'm not happy
it
about this. Just I
it
just
just
need the
needs to,
solution. I just need the decision made.
and it will. I think there's so much talk around chat right now because these LLMs are chat user interfaces. But eventually this will just be woven into the product where in that
Right.
example, you get a push notification or text, but it's not like this separate window where you've got to interface with this ongoing thread with a
Mhm.
chatbot. Not to say that there's not some good use cases for the chatbot, but I think right now what we're experiencing is just this explosion of awareness where
Yeah.
this is the first modality that everybody's familiar with. And it's so impressive that you have a lot of businesses and entrepreneurs gravitating towards how great that is and trying to figure out how they can apply it to
Right.
solve some use case within their own discipline.
Well, I'm excited about voice. Speaking of that, and just like having it integrated, and let's have the conversations, get to the decision. I have two more questions for you, and I'm going to skip security for now. But for those listening and watching, please go to Garrett's content because I really appreciate your commentary and ideas around security. What is, overhyped around security specific to AI and all of that? And then where are some things where you truly do need to think about leakage and protecting the business? The one thing that you made me think about right now, why I'm skipping over security, I'm thinking privacy. So there has been some back channel chatter in partnership with an organization I respect, the HFA, and all the work they're doing with the government. And we see what's going on with Make America Healthy Again, which is awesome. There's a lot of cool stuff coming out of that. But what I'm hearing is a lot of chatter around how can we get the government involved with all of this data accumulation, this personal data, right? And as we talk about because I get really excited about all of this hyper personalization, then I start to think, wait a second. This is getting so real, so raw. We're making decisions. And then I get into the advertising. The advertising is it reminds me of Minority Report, where it's like he walks
Yeah.
by, retina scan. It's a hyper personalized ad for just, I forget his name. Tom Cruise is the actor. But then I think about, wait a second, that is a lot of personalized, like you talked about, and they could do it today, right? But geolocate. And I'm not trying to be the conspiracy theorist and like wear the tinfoil, but it's also scaring me on how powerful this is. How do we draw the line? And I was in conversations, and some of them I was eavesdropping on, but I'm like, is our industry connecting with the government and looking at data? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? And I just don't know. I don't even know the answer to it. I don't know. I mean, I guess anything can go wrong, right? Anyone can have access and hack or whatever leakage. But it's just an interesting time to know, are we going to have to give up some privacy measures if we really want real time, real results? I don't know.
I knew you were going to ask me one that was going to catch me off guard. That's probably the one that I've got, I discussed the least, but I definitely acknowledge that there are real concerns there. And then there are also, if you're talking about the government having access to data, there's another level of analysis. If you whether you do or don't, how does that factor into geopolitical
Mm,
competitive advantage globally, right?
mhm.
And what other countries are doing. I don't know. That's a very obviously broad tactic. I
Yeah.
think maybe one fundamental tenet or pillar is more or less what we've seen evolve over maybe the last 5 to 10 years when it comes to other types of digital personal identifiable information, which is
Mhm.
you as the individual should be in control of it.
Right.
And if you decide that you want to use that for personalization, it's because you've made the voluntary decision to do so. That's more or less the way that it works today. I'm not speaking to like, HIPAA, SOC 2, that sort of thing,
Mhm.
but more
Mhm.
just PII data.
Right.
You know, most people that are thinking about that don't realize that like it, it's pretty much, 10 to 0 in terms of the amount of consumers who are willing to give their data over in exchange for whatever like convenience or personalization in this example that they receive in return.
Yeah. No, I love that. Thank you for walking through that. I have a confession before my last question. So you were talking about the traveling person, and that's me this week. I was sitting next to someone before this episode, before our recording. I was sitting next to someone at the bar. He had this strawberry cheesecake. I did not have an agent in my ear telling me, Albert, do not eat that. I ordered it. I ate it right before this. I am so sorry. And my last question is, and I already brought up Minority Report, but is there any books or movies that you feel like if you want to really understand what's going on today or maybe what's about to happen, what should we be reading or watching? Because I'm going to do that tonight. I'm going to either order it or I'm going to watch it. So let me know.
It's great. But with the cheesecake, you've got an excuse now. You didn't have the agents. What can you do? You're going to fall back to your caveman devices. In terms of media, a couple of the Scott Galloway books are good. I really like a podcast. I think you in particular would like this one. It's called the 20-Minute VC. It started out, as the name implies, a 20-minute punchy sort of podcast that would interview principals in the biggest VCs in the world, right? But it's now evolved. They have, I think, 20-minute VC product where they'll go out and they'll talk to like CTOs in hyperscaling businesses, not
awesome.
like the incumbents, but more like, the hyperscalers of today. And I find that super interesting because, these people are the ones that have their hands, they've got real world hands-on experience with this technology and understand it better than anybody else. So I'd maybe recommend that.
Amazing. Well, I appreciate you sharing, and I'm going to be all over it. This has been amazing. Thank you so much. Thanks for going a little longer than probably we expected. I can go for another hour or two just talking about all of these things. I mean, you're just a wealth of knowledge. You're making a huge impact. And like I said, you're pioneering, you're positioning us for and preparing us for what's to come. And I'm really hoping that as people listen and, there's probably some things that you'll want to go research on. Take this seriously because this is some exciting things, whether it's a personal thing or a professional thing that can really just make things a lot more efficient, make you happier, what have you, if done correctly. There's a lot of great things that were here that Garrett shared. But Garrett, if people want to learn more about you, Wellbuilt Ventures, or anything else that you're up to, where can they connect with you?
I'm on LinkedIn often. My website is garrettmarshall.com and the company website is wellbuilt.ventures.
Excellent. I love it. Well, this has been another episode of the Owner Seat Podcast. I'm your host, Albert Ramos. And as I mentioned in every episode, they are now releasing every Monday and Friday at 8 a.m. Central. Thank you so much, Garrett. Such a pleasure. I learned so much, and now I'm stimulated. I'll get on that podcast, and I can't wait to see you soon.
Thank you again for the opportunity. I always love it. And hopefully it'll bring value to your audience. And
absolutely.
If so, let's do it again.
Absolutely. Yes, please. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Cheers.